Okay, well then let's gavel this to order. Pathos Trio, and am I saying the name correctly? Pathos, or is it Pathos?
No, that's right. It's Pathos.
Okay, all right. I'm terrible with names, and I say names wrong all the time. Just ask my colleagues. And so if I say anything incorrectly today, please chime in and correct me. Alan, Felix, and Marcelina of the Pathos Trio, thank you for joining me. I don't think I've met Alan or Marcelina in person. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I think I've seen your shows, but maybe we didn't have a chance to talk.
Okay, well, I apologize if I ignored you or ghosted somebody and just walked past you, but it's a pleasure to meet and chat with all three of you. Felix, we're old friends. We've known each other for when did you first come to SOSI? When was that?
That was 2015.
Okay,
Yeah.
so like 6 years now, and it's been really fascinating for me to, I think, just because I don't know Alan and Marcelina as well, for me to see not just Felix but past SOCI students come through the program that we run, and then go out into the world, and the four of us have horrible anxiety as to whether or not any of you will find use of any of the things that we taught you outside of this the controlled spaces of a teaching environment, but. I'm kind of curious to learn a little bit more about all three of you, but can first, actually, before we get into the Pathos Trio, Felix, maybe we can start with you last, since I
Yeah.
know you the most. But maybe we'll start with Marcelina. Can you tell me a little bit about? You also play in Excelsius percussion, is that correct?
Yes, Excelsis Percussion Quartet.
Great. Also, I know that I don't think she's in the group anymore. Clara Warnar was also a SOCI student years ago. So anyway, just connecting many dots here. But Marcelina, can you tell me a little bit, like, what got you into percussion? Take me back to like baby Marcelina. Why did you even start in music to begin with?
Sure. So I'm originally from Poland. I was born in Poland, and I come from a city called Białystok in the northeast side, near the
Mm-hmm.
Belarusian border, if you know
Mm-hmm.
where that is.
Vaguely,
And
I'm only
yeah,
very tiny in a tiny way familiar with the geopolitics of the area, so I know a little bit of what you're
yeah,
talking about.
yeah. So my parents are both musicians. My mom is a pianist, but she played piano in the Philharmonic, the local Philharmonic, and they also offered public kind of like music lessons. So I took music lessons there, and I knew immediately I wanted to play percussion. Something it was just like I don't know. I'm also the kind of personality. It's like when I want something that there's just like nothing else. There's like nothing else in the world to me. So that's what happened. I think I saw percussion instruments being wheeled around. So yeah, I was attracted to just carrying tons of instruments. I guess just wheeling things. The
Well,
lugging aspect of our culture. I'm kidding, but that's literally what I first saw was people like moving stuff around, and I was like pointing to it. I don't know if I could even say. I think I could say the word bemben, which is like drum, kind of like drum. I want to play the drum.
mm, mm,
And my mom was like, and so she really wanted me to play the cello. She set up a cello lesson with a one of the best cellists like in Poland, and she happened to play in the orchestra, or this person hadn't played in the orchestra, and they they had like a pedagogy class. So they're like, okay, perfect. We'll introduce Marcelina. We'll like show the pedagogy class. Like this is what it's like to introduce, a new cello student. And I think I was like 4 or 5. And they brought out the special little cello for me. I go inside, and I've been telling my mom like I don't want to play the cello. And so I show up there, and I'm like my hands are crossed, like, and they're like, "Oh, Marcelina, welcome to cello class. We're so happy to have you. We heard you wanted to play the cello." And I turned to my mom, and I'm like, I thought I told you I
mm.
don't want to play the stupid cello. I want to play the drums. And then I walked out. And so my mom is mortified. I don't know. I hope she has a relationship with this cello still. But so that was that. And then I immigrated to United States, and I started studying percussion with Patsy Dash and the Chicago Symphony and her husband, Doug Waddell. So they lead a percussion program, maybe you're familiar with, called the Percussion Scholarship Group.
Mm-hmm.
And it's under the education division of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. It's an incredibly unique and generous program. They offer free lessons for kids grades 3 to 12 until you go off to college.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely competitive. The first few years are kind of spent like testing the kids and seeing if they have the drive it takes to do it. And I think there's like an additional test in 8th grade to see like, okay, but do you want to like actually do this as a career maybe? Because otherwise maybe it's not
Mm-hmm.
the best choice for you. And so yeah, I had free lessons. Ended up auditioning for Manhattan School of Music, and then I studied there for 6 years. And then I've been involved in chamber music and orchestral playing, solo playing, kind of just everything, and teaching. I feel like I just do a little bit of everything.
Well,
So that's
and
my long story.
no, it's great, and I have there's a million, and again for the three of you, these podcasts are very unscripted, and we will take random tangents, and I'm happy to talk the whole hour about Belarusian politics, like, and learn from you on that front too. Like, I don't care, but I do have one question. Like, how old were you when you emigrated to the U.S. and moved to Chicago?
The first time I went to the United States, I think I was 5 or 6, and it was kind of like a testing period where we came here
Hmm.
to visit my grandmother who had first come to the United States, and we wanted to test it. So I think I even attended kindergarten for like
Mm-hmm.
a couple months, not knowing any English.
Hmm.
And we went back for a year, and then I guess we like formally moved when I was like maybe 8 years old, 7, 8 years old. And that's when I like started learning English and going to ESL, and then pretty quickly started playing percussion.
And did you notice and maybe you were too young to for this sort of stuff to be processed in your head in a way that you could really make sense of, but like what were some of the biggest cultural differences you noticed, like being a young woman in Poland growing up looking at percussionists? Like, Poland has a very intense history of classical music and music as part of the culture in general, in a way that maybe US, it's just different here. And I'm curious to see what you tracked as being different from where you grew up to the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some differences. Yeah, I would say in general in Europe, but specifically in maybe in Poland, there's like a huge appreciation for arts, and yeah, that has to do with us, our very complicated history,
Hmm.
obviously, like
Hmm.
our history in the world and all the wars and things. I feel like maybe there was a sense of urgency to it. My parents certainly tell me all kinds of stories of their experience with communism
Hmm.
and things like this. So I mean, of course, I didn't know anybody of this when I was young. All I knew was that it was very common for kids to, right after class, like our regular elementary school, you would go to this, like, I think it's publicly funded, almost like a music school that's
Hmm.
attached to the symphony. So the symphonies often have this music school, and you go there and you have theory class. So already in first grade, you're learning like dictation, singing, dancing. All of this is integrated. So we were like doing dictation and things like this. And then you choose at least one instrument. I knew people who played like piano and guitar, piano and this. And a lot of the people also like took ballet or things like this. And so it was very just common. Like my parents have tons of friends, for example, from their upbringing, that they played some kind of instrument. They maybe they're architects now or do something else, but they're like, oh, we went to that music school together. So they say like music school because it was like a separate school that they
Hmm.
went to.
Hmm.
In terms of like gender, I was very fortunate in Białystok. There were two female percussionists in the orchestra.
Hmm.
So to me, actually,
Hmm.
I totally did not see it as a gendered instrument at
Hmm.
all, and I
Hmm.
continue to not see it that way.
Hmm.
So I've just been super fortunate all through my life. I've had incredibly strong women be incredible examples for me. Whereas from Poland to Chicago, obviously Chicago Symphony, having two women in the section, two incredibly amazing women who I really look up to. Then I also studied with Shi Yi Wu and
Hmm.
other people like I mentioned. But so I feel like I've just been really lucky. I've always been surrounded by talent like this.
Well, I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast in my own personal history too, and again, like, there are issues in the field that we need to deal with, and people should think long and hard before they speak to someone about, in terms of how they're going to possibly affect this person in their future. But me too. Like, I've been shocked recently in the last couple years that people would even consider a woman not being on the same level, because my fifth grade band teacher was a woman. She's a bad motherfucker. She's one of the biggest beasts in my life in terms of music. And I went to grad school and played with Ayano Katoka and Gwen. She was Gwen Burgett at the time. She's Gwendolyn Dees now. But, like, I was getting my butt kicked from day one, and so, like, it never crossed my mind to think that way. And so anyway, I'm trying to check the how much of that is just pure luck of my behalf on my behalf, and how much of it is a reality for everybody, you know. But anyway, appreciate that. Alan, what about you? Give me the nickel and dime tour of your background.
Sure. So going way back to probably I was probably in first grade. I was in my general music class, and everybody was given a recorder to learn to take home and kind of learn like really simple child tunes or what have you. And that was like my first interaction with an instrument. And nobody in my immediate family was a musician, and I was living with my grandparents at the time. So I took this instrument home. And I was really a big fan of like these like old RPG video games. I don't know if anybody here is a nerd or can recall like the older like Final Fantasies or things like these. I love those soundtracks. So
When you say, excuse me, just for the people who are maybe not as cool as the four of us, RPG stands for what?
a role playing game.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've watched the show on Netflix called High Score, and I was born in 1979. I know what a role playing game is, but you just tossed that off as if it was nothing.
Sorry. So I loved these soundtracks. So I would go home from school and I didn't practice any of the music that I was supposed to be practicing. And instead I would just learn all of these soundtracks by ear, just going through and learning like the themes or kind of learning. I had, no musical background or training at the time. So it was really off the cuff. I really wasn't aware of what I was doing specifically, but in retrospect, I was like going in and learning the harmonies and learning some of the ostinati and what things like this. So from a very early age, before I really like found my instrument, like learning music, performing, improvisation, and sort of composing were kind of interrelated for me. They were never really separate.
Can I ask? Sorry to interrupt, Alan, but like
Yeah, of course.
this is something like I was joking about being born in 1979. Like I was around when the first role playing. My dad played Diablo 1 on like a 20 megabyte IBM compresario computer or something,
Pretty awesome.
And so he'd be like beep boop beep boop beep, and then it would sit and wait for the machine to like process, and then the character go like like you were eaten by a green goblin, and he'd be like damn, and have to start over, and but now like there's a whole economy around those the theme songs, and those like it's a thing now in a way that I don't think at the time any of us were clocking as like, I don't want to say real music, but I'm sorry, the Mario Brothers music, that shit is hard. That stuff is crazy complicated,
Yeah, it's wild. And when you kind of learn about the sort of backstory behind some of those soundtracks, it was the music was sort of like the afterthought. Like they just went to the person in charge of sound design and audio, and they're like, hey, like we're on a low budget production, like can you also like write the music and can you do it in like a month? So they would write.
Can you do it with 8 bits?
Yeah, exactly. So just like making the most of what they had, and that's one of the really inspiring, kind of charming things about the franchise Final Fantasy is that the title comes from the fact that this was such a low budget production, and they didn't think they were going to make their deadlines. And I don't know the intricacies of like the rollout plan for what happened specifically, but they were worried that they were not actually going to be able to launch because of so many sort of mishandlings and things like this on the back end. So the music was like the final thing that happened. And it was kind of like, okay, like fingers crossed, like let's hope this is a success, or else, we're going to kind of eat our losses. And it turned out to be this wildly successful game. And the soundtrack, is kind of, there's a legacy, as you were saying, there's an entire economy around it. And so many of my students, like high school or undergraduates, like they come into a program and, they want to learn a lot about that music. They're interested in composing music like it. So it really kind of fostered like a generation of musicians, I think, and inspired a love and appreciation for music from a video game. So, and I was definitely affected by that. And so I eventually found myself playing piano. And again, kind of from the lens of somebody who's interested in not only just like performing written music, but also, of course, learning by ear and improvising and sort of taking something that already exists and embellishing it. And, of course, this is pre-formal education. I was very lucky to have some really incredible teachers who guided me through, high school, middle school. I ended up majoring in composition and minoring in piano at SUNY Fredonia, which is in Western New York near Buffalo. And I just finished my PhD in comp at Stony Brook University. So I kind of have this path of sort of composing and performing in, classical and chamber ensembles. But kind of backtracking for a second, growing up, I also listened to a lot of like metal music. I really was a big metal fan. So I ended up playing in a lot of bands. I was like 14 years old, playing venues that I wasn't technically legally like allowed into because I was under the drinking age. So like I had to like wait outside with my mom until my band was going on, and then I'd go load in
That's
and
like
play.
the least badass way to be in a Pantera cover band, just have
It's
to wait with your
not
mom
cool.
outside.
Exactly. Not only that, but you're the keyboard player. So like you're already like so not cool. You don't look cool on stage. And then like you're loading in with your mom. Like this is just like
you're like, which tune are we doing Enter Sandman in? Boom,
exactly.
boom, 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 boom,
Exactly. Like at the time, nobody told me, but harpsichord is not cool in metal. Actually, I think it could be sometimes. But like I was like using harpsichord sounds with like my friends, and
if it's done well, it's done well. That's all that matters.
Exactly. So I still play with bands. I'm in a trio, another trio outside of Pathos, called Gia, and it's just keyboards, bass, and guitar. So it's just like that's the core instrumentation, and we collaborate with outside musicians, different drummers. We recently worked with Matt Garskow from Animals as Leaders. We worked with some drummers from other like metal bands in a similar genre. So it's definitely like a collaborative group. And, my work with Pathos and playing with Felix and Marcelina, and this is something we all have in common, is that we love this kind of music. So it's great to play it in an ensemble like Pathos, where we have that interest in, different vernacular musics like metal, and exploring how that can kind of fuse with what we're doing in this group. But anyway, so to kind of end this, I'm kind of rambling right now, but so I kind of come from all these strange worlds, kind of similar to what Marcelina was saying, how, we kind of do everything. That's how it kind of feels for me. And so I grapple like on the spectrum of performer, composer, and, everything in between.
Awesome. And Felix, what about you, buddy? Last but not least, I know the most about you, so I'll, go fill in some gaps from where we left off.
Yeah. I guess, well, trying to recap of maybe what you already know, but in terms of how I got into percussion and just playing in general, I mean, I started pretty late. I didn't really learn how to pick up a drum or pick up sticks until I was in 9th, 10th grade, because where I went to school in Brentwood, which is it's a town out in Long Island in New York. Our school district didn't really have a lot of funding. Mm-hmm. And so we were kind of already at a disadvantage in comparison to other school districts, where I think most of the time you would normally see music programs, kids are learning to pick up and learn instruments from like grades 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the kids in my school who were interested in music and wanting to learn how to pick up an instrument were already at a disadvantage. But really the thing that got me into playing percussion, also I guess ironically, percussion wasn't even really my first choice of instrument. I think similar to other, when you're first starting to learn how to pick up an instrument, I think older students from older grades, like when you're younger, they kind of have like the instrument I guess show and tell, where
we call them instrument petting zoos.
That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah.
And every kid gets on a trombone and goes bee or reap, and then you get on the violin and you go ee, like.
And then I remember once the show and tell is kind of all said and done, they make you, the teachers make you pick like, okay, like from like choices 1 to 3, like 1 being like your most like the instrument you want to play the most, just like list the instruments you want, and then based off of like what students wrote down, they would kind of put people in their sections. And ironically, I picked percussion last. I picked violin first, then saxophone, and then percussion. But then the reason why my band, our high school band teacher, picked me to be in percussion was because my sister at the time, she was playing oboe, and she had told my high school teacher, he was like, hey, my younger brother has a really good sense of rhythm, like you should put him on percussion. So I really have to thank a lot my older sister for being where I am.
Do the three of you ever stop for 2 seconds and think about, like, I'm not someone who is willing to admit that shit's out of my control. That sometimes somebody else's decision is actually the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I had no say in it. You know, like that's something I'm very unwilling to actually admit because I feel like I want to say that I'm the one that I'm the reason. You know, I did it. You know,
You're in control of everything. Yeah.
yeah.
No,
But the reason I asked the question is like, so for you, Marcelina, if those percussionists had not, if they'd have moved all that gear the day before, and you'd have never seen them pushing those timpani or the marimba, for you, Alan, if your parents had been like, no video games, that's the devil. You know, or if, you know, for you, Felix, like if there would have just been one person who just got sick and decided that they couldn't come to that petting zoo, and you got put on saxophone. You know, like, so anyway, just to say, like, these are the things that I think about as a teacher. Like, what are the decisions I'm making that are absolutely pushing people into different areas of the world for the rest of their lives that they have no say over? And like, how much of that am I conscious of? How much of it am I not aware of? Should I schedule my percussion moves around the idea that there might be a 5-year-old Marcelina in the lobby watching me? Like, that's not a way to go about your life either, but that's clearly what happened. So, like, you know, anyway, it's just interesting to think about all that stuff. Sorry to interrupt, Felix, but
it's a wild thought. Sorry to chime in here. I just want to comment on what you just said, because it's like, I think about this sometimes too, and it's like, it's kind of terrifying when you really try to like think about that concept. And anytime like I'm in a situation where like I think about that, I view it as just like, you know, we collaborate with the universe, you know, like you can't necessarily control everything, but you can also get a sense of like the flow and where things are going. And I always find myself trying to just like stop myself from overthinking. So to say, I definitely relate to what you just said.
Sorry, Felix, I interrupted you there, buddy. You were finishing your story, but
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like I'll even piggyback like on that as I'm going, because obviously, like, you know, I want to mention you and the rest of the So guys, like how, you know, that was a huge inspiration part of like how, you know, sort of Pathos came together. But yeah, I mean, after high school, I mean, I was in the marching. I got into my high school's marching band, and that was really kind of what got me into not necessarily percussion, but just knowing that I wanted to pursue music as a career of some sort, because just being a smaller part of like a larger ensemble, and like that whole idea of like, you know, not only you, but all like 50, 60 plus other people are collaborating into making this sort of final, well, I wouldn't say product, but like this, you know, this music, this like piece, you know, performance come to life. And that was sort of the thing that's like, wow, this is like really like crazy how music brings people together in this sort of way. And then like I want to be doing something, like, I don't know exactly what yet, but something as a career in music. And then kind of fast forwarding to Fredonia. Well, actually, yeah, even before going to Fredonia, I had to audition 3 times to get into that program, because again, like I mentioned before, I started music pretty late, like 9th, 10th grade. And when I realized, okay, I want to go to music school in college, then I soon realized, because up until that point I was just playing snare drum and drum set, like, oh, I have to learn how to play keyboard instruments, I have to learn how to play timpani, like, what is this stuff? And like in a year, like less than a year, had to immediately find a private teacher, which also kind of the to go off of Marcelina, almost all my I would say, yeah, all of my major teachers have been female percussionists. Also, my private teacher, Jude St. George, like I still am super close with her. Like I always will go every summer to help her with her percussion summer camp. Up until Fredonia, you know, Cave Stonefeld. When I did my master's, Dr. Isabel Huang, all my teachers I keep really, really close contact with. And then even after in between and after grad school, studying with Keiko. So all very strong female personalities. So I also never really think about that sort of thing in general whenever I do projects. But anyway, and yeah, and in Fredonia, I guess I'm tying into now kind of how Pathos, the idea sort of started with Pathos, you know, when I was in towards the middle of grad school. I think it was when I started doing soci with you guys. And up until that point, I was kind of really lost in some ways, trying to figure out, like, man, like I'm already halfway through my graduate program. I'm not still exactly sure what I want to be doing. And then because both in Fredonia and in BG, there wasn't really this emphasis on chamber music per se. Ironically, I mean, like when you think percussion, I mean, like percussion's like in essence everything we're a part of is, you know, chamber music is at its core. And so seeing kind of the possibilities of what percussion can be in like a chamber ensemble setting, but also just the environment and just the community of SOSI really inspired me. Like, man, like once I get out of grad school, like this is what I want to be doing. Is like form my own chamber ensemble with people that I really like want to be playing with, and we like all have the similar interests, you know. And it doesn't, and so, and then kind of tying off to how Pathos came to be. Me and Alan, we went to school together because you mentioned Fredonia. So we were at school together, and ironically, we didn't even know each other so well. We kind of would see each other in passing. We maybe saw each other 3-4 times in total of our 4 or 5 years at Fredonia at like some party, like, oh hey, what's up, and then that was that. But yeah, and then after moving back to Brooklyn, immediately after graduating BG, I got in touch with Marcelina because I was at the time, and this was when I started interning with too. But I was just trying to look for musicians, just being like a new face in Brooklyn, be like, man, I don't know anybody. Like, I need to just like do research and just see people who I might want to like, who I think maybe have the same interests that I do, and like just jam and play together and see what happens. And Marcelina came up on my radar and be like, man, this chick's like so awesome. She's like doing a lot of crazy stuff. She's also into heavy metal, like, and that's like a one thread line that all three of us have in common. And I was like, man, I need to like reach out to her. And like I emailed her, or I emailed her or somehow got in contact with her and like, hey, like, would you be like down to meet up? And she was like, oh yeah, sure. And I went to her at the time, I think it was in fall 2017, in MSM. They had like a Shiiwu has
marimba concert.
Yeah. So I went to that, and that was, and I can't remember what Bach you played. I think you played Bach, some fugue.
G minor fugue.
Yeah. And that was the first time I saw Marcelina in person, like playing. I'm like, man, she's just so awesome. And then we hung out afterwards, and then set up another day where, okay, we should just like get together and like jam, and we sight read some vinyao and got some like sushi afterwards I forgot the name of the place near MSM, but originally
Jin ramen, I think, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah.
That place is so delicious.
Yes. This is a plug for Jin Ramen. Please sponsor us. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's kind of really how the trio formed. It was, I guess, originally a duo between me and Marcelina, and then we were like, okay, we like played together, and we were like, okay, this could work as a duo. And we were thinking of people to sort of commission, and Alan, in my mind, was the first person that came to mind because, okay, like this is the only composer I know who's into the same kind of music that we're into, and we have the similar backgrounds, like classically trained, but in very strong contemporary music programs. And we met up, had like a breakfast dinner at IHOP, and and talked about the commission, and
we couldn't make it to Jin Ramen that day, so we had to sell for
IHOP.
Well, let me ask you real quick. So how long is the group formed officially in what year?
In like fall of 2018, like November. Yeah.
Okay, so you've been doing stuff together now for 3 years, roughly. That's accurate.
Yeah.
What would you say? And maybe this question, just to bring it back to Marcelina, what would you say is the like? And I'm asking this question from this is a premise that's so asked questions from early on. Like, we started the group. I wasn't in the group when it was first founded, but I was in it early enough to still see the early intentions were there pretty clearly. And there was no percussion rep in real quantity for percussion quartet rep. And what was around was from like 1970 and earlier. And then there was a couple bigger pieces, maybe. But really pre-1981 or 1980 is kind of when all that stuff, and then there's Xenakis, of course, but like we were like, there's there's no pieces of like real scale for percussion quartet in the way that there are for string quartets. You go to a string quartet concert, the first half is 2 or 3 new pieces, and then the second half is a Beethoven string quartet or whatever. It's 45 minutes long. Everybody gets, you sit down and you're just in it to win it, you know? And so is like, well, let's do that. And so-called Laws of Nature was an attempt at that. Neither Anvil nor Poli. A lot of the pieces that we programmed were specifically not because the four of us were like, we love long pieces. It was like, we're exhausted from setting up 15 pieces that are all 3 minutes long. And we want to give an audience a similar experience, because maybe one of the reasons audiences aren't coming to percussion quartets, but they are coming to string quartets, is because of the set change. And if we can cut that out, you know, what does that mean? And now 20 years into it, 15 years into it for me, I feel like we checked that box enough to where other groups are starting to do that. And now we have other things on our list of like, this isn't being done, so let's do this. For you all, because the trio world, and especially with piano to percussion, that's a whole nother can of worms from what the four of us are dealing with. So for you, Marcelina, like what do you see as the major service that you feel like, why Pathos Trio? What are the three of you going to do, or have at least said you want to do enough that's made you be like, all right, I'm going to do this thing because no one else is doing it? What do you feel needs to happen in the trio world that is giving you the reason to do all this?
Yeah, I think definitely.
Other than I love playing music with my friends, you know, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's totally okay too. But like, I feel like there's a million people like that who just love playing with their friends. I love playing with my friends too. So do the other three guys. And so I'm not saying, of course, you didn't say this, but like, there's a different level between playing with your friends and then being like, no, this is what I'm doing for a living, and I have to figure that out too. And I'm kind of curious. You guys are sort of breaching that gap a little bit, and can you tell me why?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the guys can also chime in if they want to. For me, I think our trio offers something different just due to our shared interest of like this dark metal music and our interests in those genres. Also, there's like the metal music, obviously, as you know, it's not just like one type, and there's like all kinds of different types of metal music, which we're, you know, each of us have like almost like our own favorites and stuff like that. So we also bring that to the table. Also, our shared love of commissioning new composers, primarily, I feel like. We like to give people the opportunity who maybe have not had the opportunity to be commissioned to write for a trio like this. So, for example, we do try to focus more on minority composers and collaborators. So that's something that's really important to us, is commissioning that and just like lifting up people, because we certainly we certainly got to where we are because of that. So we want to do the same for others.
What about you, Alan? What I mean, and again, I'm not. This is kind of a question for the group, but also for you individually, because I don't. Not everybody in So Percussion, we don't all agree 100% on every part of So's mission. I mean, I sign off on all of it, but there's bits and pieces. Like for me personally, I love the service component portion of it. Like the food packing thing is like the thing that for me, more so than I would say like commissioning a new piece from a new composer or something. Like I love that, don't get me wrong, but like in terms of the stuff when I'm doing it, I'm like, yes, like pumping my fist. Like I pump my fist way more at the food packing than I do at, say, commissioning a new piece. But the Venn diagram overlaps enough with that, with the other guys in the group, that I'm totally fine to sign off on all of it. So like for you, Alan, what is the thing for you that gets you out of bed in the morning about Pathos Trio?
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off of the sort of practical element that you were talking about earlier with like cutting down set changes. When it comes to the pre-existing repertoire, I mean, there's a good amount of piano to percussion repertoire out there, some pretty famous pieces. And, you know, we play a lot in New York, and it's just hard to find a venue.
Sorry to stop for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, because this is a little bit of my ignorance of the piano to percussion repertoire. There's the Bartok. There's the Bartok. sorry, I don't know. I'm being a little facetious here, but like, there's not when you say there's a lot, there's not actually a lot, right?
Comparable to string quartet, that's for sure.
It's like saying there's a lot of space companies in the U.S. now. It's
Yeah,
like,
right.
no, there's three. There's NASA, Blue Origin, and
Yeah.
whatever Elon's thing is. You know, like it's still a relatively limited repertoire in the. I mean, just anytime you have percussion involved at all, you're
Yeah.
automatically dealing with a more sort of narrow window
Absolutely.
of rep.
And even kind of going into that smaller world, I mean, you have your yarn wires and groups
Yeah.
like this, and there is a repertoire that's forming there. And then you have Crumb. There's some Messiaen pieces, I believe, for 2 piano, 2 percussion, or I think there's one. The name I'm blanking on, but yeah, there's certainly, it's nothing close to like the Western classical canon, but there is this emerging body of works that's really attractive to write for, and from a composer perspective and from a performer's perspective, it's so much fun to play. Like, it's just a blast playing. I love playing with percussionists. So it was difficult to find venues that have 2 pianos that are also game to let you do the things that we do to pianos. I mean, we're very respectful to these beautiful instruments, but we definitely push the boundaries of what we're doing inside of it.
Most concert halls have a piano set aside that is for the Crumb performances.
Exactly.
That they don't care that if you're hitting it with a stick or something.
And it's it's hard finding 2 of those, and especially for an up and coming group. When we formed Pathos, I was in the first year of my PhD, so like we were all doing our own thing on the side. Like Marcelina has been in a residency with New World Symphony. Felix has been doing a bunch of freelance work in New York, and also working as a grant writer for different organizations. So there wasn't full momentum right away, but it was something we loved to do. And it was just, we weren't really getting opportunities to play in places where they had the setup that we needed. So, I mean, it made sense to just stick to what we were, just 1 piano, 2 percussion. So I think it's a more practical instrumentation, and you'll probably find that it's easier to commit to a venue because of that.
Well, can I ask you on that tip though? Like, it's just a question that I think a lot of younger folks in school, and myself included, didn't really even have to really think about until I joined SO, quite frankly. And it's like, again, I think people see SO as how we are now, and don't ever assume that we were year 1,
right,
or month 2, or that we were on salary the whole time. It's like no. Like that's a long time till that got to that point. There were halls that wouldn't book us because of the amount of gear we needed, or they wanted us to play specific rep. I mean, there's a point in your career where you don't have the political capital to push back all the time. And I'm kind of curious, and I've been in that, and listen, we're still in that. So percussion does not have the political capital worldwide to just be like, bring me my grapes. Like that's not how it works. And so like I'm curious for you all, like, has that been a discussion, or be honest with me, when you first got pushback about that, how'd you feel about that? Did that feel shitty? Did that feel like you were having to compromise your aesthetic visions for things? Like how did, and maybe this is a question for all 3 of you, how did you digest that? Or are you still digesting that concept that, your reputation, your reputational credibility maybe isn't where it needs to be in order to get your artistic visions on stage? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're always kind of, even now, still definitely we think about that. But I think, and I'm just saying this personally for me, but how I feel about the trio is that because we're still fairly new, and like Alan said, even when we formed, it was kind of like a slow. We weren't 100% fully in the trio, all 3 of us, because we had our own. We all still have our own different things, but at the beginning, it was kind of like it was a slow buildup. But at least the way I sort of think about it, because we're still a fairly new ensemble, there's as opposed to like if we were a group or ensemble that has been around for 10 years, I don't think we don't have necessarily to worry about reputations and things like that. And we're kind of in the process of building that up, and what you were talking about before, one of the things that I really find appealing about the trio is that, one, kind of what you were alluding to earlier, there's not really, I mean, there's there's very limited repertoire for percussion piano, for two percussion, two piano even, but there's almost no repertoire for a two percussion, one piano. So so from that prospect, being able to build and we knew this from the get-go when we formed the trio that okay, there's no repertoire for our trio configuration. So we're just gonna decide we're gonna just commission and the pieces that we're gonna write, which we love to collaborate with people anyway. But then also this idea of for the trio, because of our backgrounds being classically trained in strong contemporary music programs, plus our interest in darker, heavier music, we kind of thought of groups that sort of blend the two worlds together in a way you have groups like Teague or Square Peg Round Hole, where sometimes they have in their repertoire, I guess repertoire if you want to call it that. Sometimes you'll see those groups play, in universities in a music school setting, and sometimes they're playing in actual music venues. So the idea of and there's not really groups out there that are kind of a hybrid that are doing both things simultaneously, and for me that's a really big attraction with the trio is there's not a lot of groups doing that sort of thing. So why can't we do the same thing, but for again being able to have repertoire that appeals to both classical music audiences, but also something that we can play in a rock venue. So that's sort of the things, at least for me, and I'm sure Alan and Marcelina can agree that those are the bigger things that I think we find appealing about the trio, that we're really trying to, I guess, push those boundaries. And going back to what you were saying before, Josh, about reputation, just again, I think as a newer ensemble, we're kind of in the process of building that. So it's not, we're kind of just trying to write our own. I don't know if this sounds cliche, but kind of writing our own destiny per se, and just I think as long as we're focusing on what's true to us and what we're interested in, then because people are gonna always there's always gonna be people out there who don't like what you do. So it's just focusing on who you are and what you like, what interests you. You're gonna build your own audiences naturally that way, and I think that's kind of at least the way I think about it. That's just kind of how I think.
Well, people are gonna. The other thing too that I've learned in my last 15 years of doing this is that audiences are smarter than every performer all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They may not be smart in the way of oh, I could hear that retrograde inversion of the 12th tone row or the inversion of that palindrome you played, but they can see through the bullshit, and they can tell if when you're hearing an ensemble playing Boulez, you can tell if you're watching the Chicago Bulls play that Boulez or if you're watching the Cavs from 2007. Where LeBron's gone, he's in Miami or whatever, and things fell apart, and you can tell they're not communicating, and it's not interesting to watch, and so people stop coming. That's why people don't stop coming to basketball games because teams lose. You stop coming because it's uninteresting to watch. And I have zero problem watching someone lose if it's interesting. And so that's the thing. If I'd be a horrible GM of a basketball team, because I'd be you guys look miserable because you're losing. It's just just be more interesting. That, of course, that's not exactly how the NBA should work, but I think in terms of music venues, I think that's the case. I think when people are clearly invested in what they're doing, and I think that's what So has always tried to be, is listen, even if a hall is we'll only pay you to come if you play one of these three composers. The four of us are going to be all right, which one of these three do we like the most? Or we're going to feel okay sleeping at night. And if nobody fits that mold, then we'll turn the gig down. I'll go work at Starbucks. I'm okay with that. I don't feel, or I'll go mow lawns or play steel drum gigs. I don't feel like I need to champion a composer's music I don't feel strongly about. But if there's a way to figure it out, then we try to, because again, you're just getting at bats, building your reputation. Marcelina, what has been the hardest part for you personally about being in a chamber group? You mentioned up front that you're the type of person who, when you see something that you want, you just go at it until it's yours. Has that ever like bit you in the ass in a chamber music setting where like like you end up getting in a fight with your colleagues because you feel so strongly about something? And I'm asking these questions because these are all things I've experienced, and that I've gone hard in the paint against my band members for one reason or another. Like, I'm not looking for a specific band fight, but like for you, like what has been the most challenging thing about being in a chamber music group?
I really don't find it challenging at all to work with these two. I find that we get along really, really well, and I think, I mean, I almost think of them as my like two brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I think one younger, one older. You guys, I think you know which one is who. And
Who's the one you pick
This
on?
is
Who's
this
the
is
one
how
you
the
pick
fights
on?
start.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
so,
She's the instigator.
Okay.
and
I get it.
sometimes I feel like their mother. Anyway, another topic. So. Oh man. But yeah, I really like it's really not a struggle in terms of like working on something, or when it comes to pieces. I feel like really it's like quite remarkable how often we're on the same page. Um, and I am very kind of more of a not very like meek and shy. I don't know if you can tell, but that's just not my personality at all. So you would think that maybe we'd run into issues, but I just think I picked two people that I just work really well with. So that's not really so much of an issue as just time.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're all busy individuals, but yeah, like having a full-time gig at New World Symphony and playing in the New World Symphony, playing with other orchestras around the country, playing solo music, and then playing in another chamber ensemble as well as this one. I think my main, like, like demon I have to fight is just time. Just the time to like respect everyone's time as well as my own. So just, figuring that out. Yeah, it's not so much anything about that. I don't know. We're lucky.
Well,
We'll see.
it's good. I mean, I need to check my own BS here, because when I ask questions about like, so tell me why it's so hard to be in a chamber group, and everybody's like, no, it's not so hard. I'm like, oh, maybe it's just hard to be in so percussion. maybe we're a really hard group to be in, and I'm just not aware of it. But I feel like for you, like, what has been the biggest, now that you're a couple years into this, like, what is the biggest challenge for you that maybe you didn't expect to have to think about? Like, what's been the biggest, I don't want to say like what's been the biggest bummer for you, but like what would you have told Felix at SOSI in 2015 to like get your shit together on this thing, because in 6 years you're going to need it?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, for sure. Definitely. Because I also do kind of the logistics of the group and like in the managing it. Yeah, if I could tell myself back in 2015, like Felix, if there was one thing I would definitely have told myself, is that you got to learn, be prepared to learn all these other things that go into running an ensemble, as opposed to trying to understanding how managing a group works, like doing bookings, all those kinds of logistics. And we share the responsibilities between the three of us, but mostly in terms of like going back and forth with presenters and bookings and the bigger logistics. Like I kind of handle all of that, and so that's definitely always kind of yeah. It takes sometimes there's times where it takes a lot, but I'm fully invested, and I love both Alan and Marcelina and what we're doing it as a group. So for me, I was always in the back of my mind that it's worth doing all of this stuff, because the payoff is going to be we're doing these amazing things that we want to be doing, and even kind of, and I love the question you asked before about like what are the like difficulties of being a trio, and that's something I'm always kind of, all three of us, I think we were pretty cognizant about, is usually when there's like stuff like opportunities and stuff that come our way, obviously like it gets directed to me first, and I'll like relay it to Alan and Marcelina, and we really go back and forth and dial like and have conversation about, hey, like, is this something we want to be doing? And we've had those moments where it's like, yeah, like it could be like a gig that pays well, but it's not something we really want to be doing. So we're just gonna not do it. We'll just exit out. So we're really aware of that from the get-go. To and especially for me, kind of doing the management, I'm always really trying to be cognizant of whatever is we decide to do as a trio. We have to all be like on the same page about. And even if someone's like slightly like, I'm not really feeling it, then it's like, all right, we don't have to do it. There's not that pressure.
That's interesting. I mean, it's very similar to the way So makes decisions. I mean, we try to think of ourselves as a like egalitarian democracy where like everybody has an equal say. At the end of the day, we do have to have some sort of, not a vote, but there has to be enough consensus. But we don't require everybody to agree 100%.
Yeah.
It's taken a second to get to that point, but like for me, like I'm a person who's like, as long as my viewpoint is heard and acknowledged and everybody in the room is willing to say we're not doing what Josh said, but I heard what he said, then I'm fine. Then I'll play whatever piece everybody wants to play, even if I hate it. Even if I hate it, I'm happy to walk on stage because everybody in the room knows I hate it. I'll still play it like a professional. I'll still play it just like I would play any other percussion piece. But in terms of our decision making 15 years in, there's been enough decisions that have come up where if we tried to get consensus where everybody agreed on everything every time, we'd still be back in year one trying to get ourselves through every decision. But like for you, Alan, what's been the biggest sort of, you're sort of the odd man out here in that you're working with two percussionists who kind of operate in a different stream maybe than as a pianist. You're also have your foot in another part of the music economy that has its own baggage, where I'll bet you have friends who are out there playing Chopin sonatas like note perfectly every night and are having panic attacks about it. And you're sort of looking at Evan Chapman's music going like, you mean I can miss notes all over the place and the only people who care are Felix and Marcelina, and they don't even care? I'm going to do that. That sounds amazing. Like let pianists 100 years from now freak out about playing Evan Chapman's music well. But
right.
Like right now, you get the opportunity as a pianist to sort of shed all that bullshit of baggage that your other friends have. Like, so I'm kind of curious from your angle, what is this like for you?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting kind of sort of environment to walk into, and you said it perfectly, like the burden of history and the burden of like all of these incredible pieces, pre-existing works with countless recordings that doesn't exist for our repertoire. So there is a kind of liberty, and it's funny, I feel like I play my best with this group because I'm not going in with that anxiety. I kind of go in with for me there's a high level of play. Not like play, but just like playfulness. Like I feel like I'm playing, and that always brings out, I think, the best work in me. And in any working environment, whether it's composing, performing, teaching, I'm always looking to create an environment where that is the overall vibe, because that usually, for me personally, generates the best result, and I learn the most in that situation. The difficulty about it is that, and this isn't really unique to our repertoire, it's the same thing for any other pianist out there. Like, you're playing on a different instrument all the time. But what's unique is that a lot of our repertoire is, inside the piano, and the builds of the piano can complicate different pieces. So there has to be multiple versions of different pieces so that I can get inside and do what I need to do. So that's one thing that's always tricky. Another thing as a composer that's difficult is, I have so many of my close friends are incredible composers, and we're just one group, and we live long. We're not all of us are in New York. We don't rehearse all the time, so we can only do so much repertoire. We can only commit to so much repertoire. So it's really tough having these conversations all the time where it's like, hey, like, I'd love to work with your group. And I'm like, oh, I'd love to work with you too. And I have worked with you in other iterations, but I don't know if we're going to be able to make it. And I'm always very honest. I'm just like, I don't know if we're going to be able to make it work. And it's a tough conversation to have.
Yeah.
So, there's that part weighs pretty heavily on me, actually. It stresses me out.
Well, what are you doing to alleviate that stress?
Well, I don't like the word no. I don't like saying no to somebody. I always like saying I can't necessarily do that, but I'm like, I would love to play it with you, or I'd love to just, if you ever have solo piano music, send it my way. Or, we're going to rehearse this day. Like if there are just some concepts that you wanted to bring in, and like, maybe when we're taking a break or something, we can look through it. To come at it with like some other solution, not to just shut it down and be like, no, sorry, it doesn't fit this framework, so therefore it's a no. I try to work it out.
Do you guys have you ever, I mean, Felix, I mean, this is a question for everybody here, but have you thought about doing any sort of workshop stuff? And pardon my ignorance if you already have and I just completely missed it, but like in terms of like a training ground for, composers, and I will say composers young or old. I mean, just because you're 80 years old doesn't mean you've written for percussion. Or piano and percussion. There's a lot of composers out there who would absolutely love to work. First of all, even if they've written, Steve Reich asked us questions about how to write for the marimba. Why? Because we view the marimba slightly differently than maybe Bob Becker or Russ Hartenberger. And there's no value judgment there on Russ or Bob. It's just Steve's curious to know about what young players today are doing with a 5-octave marimba, So like the idea that there might be somebody who's written a shitload for percussion, George Crumb is still alive, I think, right? So you should send him your music and be like, hey, what do you? We'd love to get your thoughts on. Like anyway, just to say, like, have you thought about doing any sort of like a training seminar or not like a SOCI thing, but like any sort of where you can actually carve out time for that, Alan, is what I'm saying. Like rather than being like, I don't know, send me a click track. Maybe we can meet together on Zoom. Like, fuck all that. Like, have you ever thought about getting a week in a room somewhere where you can actually just try this stuff out?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's funny that you bring that up because it's actually something I personally have been thinking a lot about in the past 2-3 weeks because you're actually the third person in the past 3 weeks that brought that up.
Marcelina was first, and then Alan was second.
about our group being like, hey, like you guys are doing interesting things. Like, you guys have you guys ever like considered doing like workshops? So it's really, for me, it's been like on my mind. It's something that it's funny that you bring it up that I want to eventually have the conversation with Alan and Marcelina about because we like a month earlier on in the summer we were kind of applying for residencies at Avaloq and Yellow Barn, and really our outline for Yellow Barn was kind of our initial. That was really when we were really starting to think about the ideas of doing residencies. Like, hey, like having ideas of like not residencies, ideas of workshops together as a trio, and then even doing individual workshops of what all three of us have, like especially like tailoring to like our strengths, like with Alan, like really diving into composing and in the film world, because that's really where he is outside of Pathos, and Marcelina with her experience being orchestral percussionist and being New World Symphony, and the struggles and like how can people prepare for that kind of lifestyle and auditions, and then like my experiences in the past 4 years doing management with an ensemble and like grant writing, so these are kind of things we have been thinking about, but yeah, I think up until now we've been focusing more on everything else in terms of like commissioning, like doing things as a group. Then now I think we're kind of trying to branch out and are thinking more about those kinds of things. Things outside of performance that we can like offer.
Does it seem like daunting to have to like start a summer festival or something like that? Does it seem like terrifying? All right, well, good. I'm glad you nodded yes, because it is, and it should be. But do you know how SOCI started?
I'd love to hear more about
it. I think I remember the story.
So did a gig at Smith College, and we went out to a bar afterwards, and it was after we were on tour for a while. We got super drunk, and we were like, there's no good summer festivals. They all stink. And of course, that's not true. They didn't all stink, and there were several good festivals, but there wasn't a whole lot that were doing specifically percussion. There was Lee Stevens, Bob Becker was doing the xylophone camp, and Nancy Zeltzman. Really, that was it. And again, no value judgment here. It's just true. Those were the only real three OPI at Oberlin was one I went to. And we're like, who do we know that would let us we're like, "Why don't know? Does anybody know anybody?" And Jason was like, "Steve Mackey." Because we were, he was the department chair at Princeton. And we're like, well, they don't have a percussion department. Well, we'll bring all of our own stuff. Do you think we could get rooms? And so we texted Steve that night, totally drunk, all of us. And we're like, can we do a summer festival at Princeton? And he's like, if I give you the rooms, you can have that. You can have it. And then the next morning we woke up and we were like, who texted Steve last night?
Oh man, not again.
And it was like, next thing you know, then Steve's like, cool, what dates do you want? And we're like, oh my God, now we have a summer festival. And it was like that. It was literally just, who do we know and who do we know that has space? And right now on this screen, you both, Alan and Felix, you have Kay Stonefelt. Now, Kay, I don't want Kay to call me up and be like, what the hell did you tell them? But you could drop Kay a line and be like, hey, do you think we could use your space for a week? Anytime. You tell us when and we'll come in. And now you have a summer festival. Marcelina, you've got friends and family and teachers in pardon my pronunciations, Bialystok. Did I say it wrong? I said it wrong. That was right? Bialystok? Okay. You've got a teacher in Bialystok that you could message and be like, hey, this awesome group I'm in, we're doing this thing. Do you think we could come to Poland for a week? And then you've got a summer festival in Poland. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, I know it's the terrifying part isn't scheduling it. It's the moment when your students who paid to come walk in the door. That's when it's really terrifying. But that's also fun, and you'll survive and you'll be okay. So anyway, just putting in a plug for all three of you to start a summer festival and teach other people how to write for your instruments. It's not as hard as you think. I have one final question for you all, and I've stolen an hour and 4 minutes of your life already. So I want to I wish we could do this on mute, with each of Alan and Felix on mute, so you can't actually hear what Marcelina says. But we'll start with Marcelina here. If money and time was not a logistical issue for you, meaning the group had $500,000 in the bank, you weren't worried about touring, you weren't worried about paying your rent, you had all the time in the world and all the money in the world. Who would you want to work with with Pathos? You personally, what would be the dream project, the dream gig you want to work with this person or these people on something?
Oh man, that's a really hard question.
Do you want me to tell you what SOS is?
Sure, yeah.
SOS, there's kind of two. One is a personal one. For me, it is to play with the Skiffle Bunch Steel Orchestra from Trinidad. That's a 140-piece steel band, to play with them at Carnegie Hall with percussion. That's my big, if money was not an issue, I would fly 140 people from Trinidad with 140 sets of steel drums, put it on Carnegie's big stage, and blow the roof off that place. That would be my dream. So for you, with Pathos, what would that be? Or to play at Madison Square Garden with Radiohead. That would be the other. That would be the other big one.
Oof. Maybe a collaboration with a metal band. So
which one though? There's a lot of metal bands. That's like saying I'm going to collaborate with a pianist. Which metal band? Are you going Sepultura?
I feel like during the pandemic, I don't even know who's playing together anymore. And I feel like a lot of the bands I listen to are very old, like Slayer and Pantera and all these people.
No hate in my heart for Slayer or Pantera. Are you kidding me? They're great.
Yeah. Man. One that comes to mind is Felix, what band did we see together that you really like? Dark Funeral?
Yeah, I was gonna even say Batushka. I love them. I feel like that would be amazing. It's in your hometown.
Yeah.
Who's Batushka?
Batushka means Holy Father, kind of.
Okay.
We say it's actually not in the name. Batushka is not Polish. It's Russian. Mm-hmm. But the band originates from my province. They're actually very low key. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody's seen their faces because they wear masks, full masks and garbs and things. So they're very low key, but they come from my hometown.
We consider doing that for Pathos, wearing mask and
Yeah.
But their shows are super cool. They walk in and it's like masks. Basically, they light up candles, and they have like what's it called? This thingy, the smoke thing that they swing in Catholic.
Yeah, they like the incense cantor or whatever.
Yeah, the incense and all that stuff. I really like the show of it all, and also just the fact that they're from my homeland. I like Behemoth. They're really, really great. There's a lot of great Polish bands people don't know about. So maybe there. And then to be able to play in Poland, I think no matter what, I would just love to tours all over the world, if money's not an issue, but especially Poland.
Excellent. Awesome. That's great. What about you, Felix? Money is not an issue. Time is not an issue. Who would you collaborate with?
Oh, man. I was trying to think of this as Marcelina was talking, but man. Alan, do you have an answer so I can think more about this? There's like this, there's just like so many artists.
And I want you to I want you to think too, like, again, like whenever when I ask this question, people automatically like, well, okay, well, it's clear he doesn't want me to say Dave Matthews Band or Billy Joel. It's like, no, actually, if So Percussion could play with Dave Matthews Band, I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm walking on stage with Carter Beauford, and y'all can go eat shit. I don't care what anybody thinks. Judge me away. I don't care. Like, and so, like, the world is your oyster here, Alan.
I would do two things.
Okay, good.
First of all, I'd go back in time, because obviously this shouldn't be time specific.
That's true. I did say time was not an issue, and logic was money's not an issue.
Where I could just go back in time and not have to have my mom help me move things on stage, so my reputation could be salvaged. So that's the first thing that I would do. And then I would collaborate with Suchocka.
All right. Okay. Excellent. I think you should go back in time to get rid of age limits on bars, like drinking ages. Like maybe let's not shame your mom so much. Let's go back prior to that.
Poland.
Oh yeah.
So
Felix, did you get your answer yet?
Yeah, I think so. I think either between Animals as leaders and Between the Buried and Me.
Wait,
Between the Buried and Me is definitely
Animals as leaders. Is that what you said?
Yeah, they're both progressive metal bands.
And Between the Spirit and Me,
or Between the Buried and Me, which for me they're like my favorite band.
Listen. This is all over my head. I can tell that you're naming bands that I would guess would play metal music, for me my reference is like Pantera, Slayer, and Sepultura. That's as old school as I get. The reason I say that is, I asked you to do this little exercise. Like, I read a book whenever I first joined called The Last Lecture by this guy named Terry Pauscher. And it was Pauscher, I think. Just I think some sort of English professor or something, and he got pancreatic cancer and then decided his last thing was just to give a big long lecture on like a series of guest lectures that he would then write a book about. And he was going to leave it as a gift to his daughter, who was too young to realize that he was dying of pancreatitis. All the stuff. It's terribly sad. You'll cry the whole time. But one of the things he talks about in there is making a to-do list, but being okay with different types of to-do lists. Like you go to the grocery store, get apples, oranges, watermelons, Band-Aids, Tylenol PM, and Pepto. Then there's the to-do list, which is like publish your friend's music, help your buddy learn how to read music, teach your friend finale, and start a podcast. And then there's the third one, which is like start a chamber music group, play at Madison Square Garden, become tenured. Like the things that are more sort of abstract that you're not exactly sure how you're going to get there, but are things you definitely want to do. So has a to-do list, and Felix, I'm sure you've seen this in our So studio. That's like, be influenced by and influential to others. Like, always be willing to be influenced by others, but also try your best to be influential to others in a good way. Make more money than you spend. It's like on our to-do list. Laugh more than you don't. Like, it's dumb shit like that. Play with the book, or play with Radiohead at Madison Square Garden is on there. And honest to God, of the 10 things we put on there 10 years ago, we've crossed off like 7 of them. Make enough money, I think, is still uncrossed off. We still haven't made enough money. But like, I think for the three of you, I want to encourage you early on in the sort of genesis of Pathos. Like, I want to do a podcast in 10 years and sort of see what it is you all got right and what it is you all totally shat the bed on. Because those are, you have to own both equally, and they are both what makes you who you are and why you do what you do. And I'm very grateful actually that I made that list with 10 years ago, because now as a 42-year-old, I look at that list and I'm just like, you're such a silly goose, Josh, but you were right. Like you weren't wrong there. And because the thing you lose when you get older is that perspective of dreaming of like, what is the thing that I can do if there are, because every once in a while, some point in your career, I don't know when, somebody's going to drop $100,000 in your lap. It could be from a grant. It could be the government. It could be somebody else is going to be like, we love what you do. And if you've never dreamed, then you're going to spend that money on workers' comp and dumb shit that is not all that important. And so anyway, I think right now at this point, you guys are killing it. I listened to all the stuff that you sent me, Felix. The level of chamber music, I think, in this country, but specifically in our little circles, is night and day from where it was when So entered the world. So you are doing the right things. Just the other tiny piece of advice that we got from Robin Engelman in Nexus was 10 years. Keep your head down and your mouth shut for 10 years before you expect anything. So you're 3 years in. Take that as a compliment. That's not to be meant to be a depressing thing, but like, just keep swinging. It's the people who stick it out for 10 years that are the people who are around after 10 years. Okay. Do you guys have any other final thoughts before we wrap up? I'm really psyched, Felix, to see sort of where things have come since you and I last parted ways and all that stuff. And I'm really proud of the work, even though I have no reason to be proud of you all. I'm pumped for the work that you all are doing. It's really beautiful, and it's really high level too, which is, just the other pin I want to put in this, that like, of course, it's awesome and it's really, really good. So, is there any final parting thoughts from you all, Alan, before we leave?
This was great. We really appreciate you having us on. It was a lot of fun to talk to you, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You're quite
likewise.
welcome.
I mean, loved a lot of the thought-provoking questions. Some stuff like I haven't even. I think some of us might not even really taken the time to sit back and think about. So.
Yeah.
Well, we will do this again. The door on my podcast is always open, and I'm really curious to sort of have people back on and ask them almost the same questions and see like the rings of a tree, sort of how your answers have changed. And this last 2 years, if you look back at all my podcasts, like these last 2 years are pretty dark rings of the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of storms and trauma in these last 2 years, and I'm proud of all of it. So anyway, just keep it up. It was lovely to chat with you all, and I really hope we can meet in person and do this in person the next time. That would be even better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right,
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yep, stay healthy, and we'll chat soon.
Take care, Josh. Thank you.
Yep, see you later.
See ya.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on, in so percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in Pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandre Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.